Hello and welcome. During this video, we are going to walk through how to set up the mobile consent forms that are digitally sent out to your clients when using the mobile intake application in Centerpiece. Before we get started, I want to point out that I'm assuming that you've already watched the mobile intake overview video. If you haven't watched that video, you can find it in the Video Training Center under the Help tab in Centerpiece. Okay, so during the mobile intake overview video, we walked through all three of the steps of mobile intake, and we used this diagram as our guide. We also discussed how the first step of creating the form request is like creating a digital clipboard that has your client's name along with the specific mobile intake and consent forms that you want your client to fill out before their visit. Before being able to complete the form request, we first need to create the mobile intake and consent forms that we'll be using in the form request. In the last video, I walked you through creating the mobile intake forms, and in this video, I'm going to walk you through how to create the consent forms. Consent forms correspond to the legal documents that require client signatures before receiving support for services from your center. Examples of consent forms include HIPAA consent and privacy, request for services and limitation of services, signed authorization of release of health information, etc. So let's go ahead and go to the Centerpiece scheduler and get started. To create a form request, I'll click here on the ellipsis under the Mobile Forms column for this client. The form request dialog will open and we can select the specific intake and consent forms that we want to send this client for her appointment. We completed creating all of the intake forms in the last video, so you can see that those are right here, but notice that we don't have any consent forms to select. So let's go ahead and close out of this dialog and go set up our consent forms. To do that, I'll click here on the mobile intake link. I'll toggle open my task pane so I can see the tasks that are available for this page. And to manage my mobile consent forms, I'll click here on the consent forms link. Notice here in the grid that I currently have no consent forms. To create our first consent form, I'll simply click on the new consent form button right here. The consent form dialog, which is similar to the letter editor, opens. Okay, so in this video, I'm only going to walk through creating one consent form, but the process is the same for each additional consent form that you wish to set up. In this example, I'm going to create a HIPAA consent and privacy form. So the first thing I'm going to want to do is type a title for the document right here. Next, I can use the editor to either type in my letter, or if I already have it in a Word document, I can copy the text from the Word document and paste it here. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to go ahead and share my Word document so you can see it. And next I'm going to select all the body text on this Word document. Then I'll right-click on my mouse and select to copy the text. Now notice that I didn't select any of the address info here at the top or the signature information at the bottom, and I'll show you why in just a second. But I just want to select the text in the body of the document along with the title. Okay, so with that copied, I'll go ahead and go back to Centerpiece, and then I'll right-click within the body of the editor and go ahead and paste it in. And just a note, I could also use this paste button on the toolbar right here. Okay, so I'm going to click Save to make sure that I don't lose any of my changes, but notice that when I pasted the text in from Word, the spacing isn't the way I wanted. So I'm going to go ahead and highlight the text, and then I'm going to use this Format Stripper button. I'll select to remove all formatting. Once that's done, I can go back in and then add the spacing so that I make it look the way I want it to look. And I'm also going to bold and underline this title, and I'm going to make it a little bit bigger than the body text. I'll click Save once more, and the last step that we want to do before we're done is make sure that our document is formatted correctly when viewing it as a PDF. This is important because when the consent forms are returned and processed, they're converted to PDFs under the client file. So to do that, I'll click the Preview PDF button right here, and then I'll click to open and view the PDF. You can see that the center address is added right here, then the client's name, date of birth, and their file ID are here. Next, you can see the body of the form that we pasted in. And on the bottom, you can see that the client's signature section as well as the date signed was added in. So that's why you don't have to add those sections into the body of the letter. Okay, so I'll close out of this, and I would want to keep editing and checking the PDF view until I'm happy with the way things look. And once I'm done, I'll click Save and Close, and you can see that the form has been created. Okay, well, let's quickly go back to the scheduler. I'm going to go ahead and close the task pane so again we have more viewable space. And then I'm going to click on the ellipsis for this client once more. The form request dialog will open, and notice the consent form that we just created shows up right here. In order to select this form and add it to the form request for the client, I would just click right here. Okay, so we have our first form created, but you will want to repeat the steps we just walked through until you've created the additional consent forms that your center uses. Once completed, they will be added right here, and you'll be able to select which ones you want to include in the individual form requests that you create. And remember, when creating a form request, you only need to select the specific intake and consent forms that are needed for the type of appointment that your client is coming in for. Okay, so now that both your intake and consent forms are created, the next step is for us to walk through completing step 1, which is creating a form request. We will walk through that process as well as the 3 ways the client can receive the form in the next video. If you have any more questions about how to create your mobile consent forms, please click on the Help tab and view the Setting Up Mobile Consent Forms under the Office Management section. And if you would like more information on using the letter editor, see the Create and Manage Letters video in the Video Training Center. And as always, please don't hesitate to reach out if you need any help. Thanks so much for your time.